Jesus washed feet like a slave. That same night he said, "The Father is greater than I." In the next few minutes you are going to see why that sentence, read in full, says almost the opposite of what it appears to say. John chapter 14 verse 28. In Greek, ho pater meizon mu estin. It sits in the very same gospel that opens by declaring that the Word was God, and one of the three answers you're about to see comes from the man who spent his entire life refuting the people who used this passage. This channel affirms that Jesus is the Messiah and that he is God. The sentence exists, it is real, and we are going to look at it head on. If this helps you, leave a like. It helps these studies reach more families. Let us start with the simplest thing of all, reading it in full. From the beginning of the sentence, the King James renders it this way: "Ye have heard how I said unto you, I go away and come again unto you. If ye loved me, ye would rejoice, because I said, I go unto the Father, for my Father is greater than I." Read it again slowly and you will notice two strange things. The first is how it begins. "I go away and come again unto you." That is not merely a farewell. It is a farewell, with the return date included in the same breath. The Master announces a departure and a homecoming in the same line, before saying anything at all about the Father. The second is how it ends. The declaration about the Father is not standing alone or floating free. It is hooked onto the end with the word "for." And what comes before that "for" is not a definition of anything. It is an affectionate rebuke. The Nazarene is not explaining who he is. He is explaining why his disciples ought to be glad that night, and they are not. That changes the entire ground of the discussion, and I want you to see how much it changes. When somebody tells you the Father is greater than I, therefore Jesus is not God, what that person has done is take the last clause of a long sentence and leave out everything that came before it. What came before says that they should have rejoiced. Then it says that the reason for that joy is that he is going to the Father. And only at the very end does the comparison appear, which means the line functions as the final motive for a joy they were not feeling. The question that text answers is not what Jesus is. The question it answers is this one: why should you be glad that I am leaving? Hold on to that question. We are going to come back to it, and the answer is 3 chapters away, on that same night, spoken by that same man. Before we touch the Greek, stay in the scene a moment longer, because the lines surrounding this one tell you what he is speaking for. A little earlier, the Master had left them something that sounds like a last will. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." That is verse 27, sitting directly on top of the line we are discussing. The immediate setting is not a theology class. It is a man calming terrified people. And right after that comes something even more revealing, because he himself states what he said all of it for. Verse 29, "And now I have told you before it come to pass, that when it is come to pass, you might believe." Stop there. He set the purpose, not a commentator. He did not say he was speaking so they would grasp his nature. He said he was telling them in advance so that when it happened, they would believe. This is information handed over ahead of time to people who within a few hours were going to see something horrifying. The close of the scene, 2 lines later, is the part least quoted and the part that carries the most weight for our question. It says he will not talk with them much longer because the prince of this world is coming and that this prince has nothing in him. And then he drops the underlying reason, that the world may know that I love the Father, and as the Father gave me commandment, even so I do. There it is, the verb that is going to organize the rest of this study. Commandment. Sent. The scene ends with the Master describing what he does in terms of a commission received, and in the very next line he stands up and says, "Arise, let us go hence." Hold on to that too, because the man making this comparison has just defined himself as somebody who was sent. And in the Jewish world of that century, sent was not a vague word. It was a figure with rules of its own, and those rules explain the entire sentence. Now let us go to the Greek, because this is where the discussion gets technical, and there is a very popular argument I need to dismantle before you use it, and it leaves you looking foolish. The term is meizon. It is the comparative of megas, great, greater, bigger. So far, no mystery. There is a defense circulating everywhere that goes like this. If the master had meant to speak about nature, he would have said Crichton, better, and not meizon, which would be a matter of position. Since he used meizon, the issue would be rank and not essence. Problem solved. Do not use it. That argument does not stand on its own, and it is not a rule of the Greek language. Meizon is not reserved for office, and Crichton is not reserved for substance. The letter to the Hebrews in chapter 1 verse 4 says that the Son became superior to the angels, and it uses precisely Crichton to speak of dignity and inheritance, not of internal composition. The language has no button that separates those two ideas. Do you see the problem? And this matters for a practical reason. If you go out repeating that defense, the first person who opens a dictionary will take it apart in 10 seconds. An argument that collapses under a dictionary is no use to you for holding anything up. What does settle the matter is not a rule of vocabulary, it is usage. And the decisive use of meizon is not in a German lexicon from the last century. It is in John's own gospel, that same night, in that same room, in the mouth of that same man. I will show it to you in a few minutes, and you will understand why it is impossible to confuse. One more moment in that room, because I want to close a door for you that a lot of people try to escape through, and it leads nowhere. At some point you will hear it said that the problem lies in the translation, and that in the original the thing says something else. It is worth knowing that this is false, and worth knowing it for yourself. The major English versions agree here without a fight. Some read that the Father is greater than I, others that he is greater than I am. None of them softens the line, none of them hides it, none of them puts it in brackets. And there is no significant manuscript variant at this point. The papyri, the great codices, and the ancient versions all carry the same thing. This verse has none of the textual debate that genuinely does exist in other places in the Bible. That fact plays in our favor, even though at first glance it is uncomfortable. If the answer to the problem depended on some alternative translation that only a specialist knows about, we would not have an answer. We would have an excuse. The text being firm and unanimous forces us to do the only honest thing, which is to understand it in its context. So when somebody insinuates to you that the translators manipulated something, you can tell them with complete calm that no, the text is what it is, that it is translated correctly, and that this is precisely why it is worth reading in full. First, you need to see where we are standing, because the place and the hour explain the tone of everything said there. We are at a supper. Chapter 13 tells us that the master rose from the table, laid aside his outer garment, took a towel, and washed his disciples' feet. It tells us that one of them was reclining at his side, because in that period, people did not dine sitting on chairs around a high table. They ate reclining. It tells us that he dipped a piece of bread and gave it to Judas, and that Judas took it and went out. And it closes the scene with 3 words in Greek that cut like a knife. It was night. Everything that comes afterward happens between those walls, with an empty place at the table. And what comes afterward has a technical name. From the end of chapter 13 to the end of chapter 17, we have what scholars call a farewell discourse. This is not a label invented by modern commentators to make the text behave. It is a genre the Hebrew Bible was already using, and one that any first-century Jew would have recognized instantly. Moses speaks this way before he dies in the closing chapters of Deuteronomy. He gathers the people, announces that he will not cross the Jordan, hands leadership to Joshua, leaves the law in writing, and sings. Joshua does the same at the end of his own book, at Shechem, when he gathers the tribes and tells them he is old now and that they will have to choose. And David does it in Chronicles, before the whole assembly, when he hands the plans of the temple to Solomon and says out loud that the work is not for a man, but for the Lord. Look at what those three scenes have in common, because it is the key to this entire video. In none of them is the one saying goodbye defining his own nature. Moses does not explain what he is made of. Neither does David. What a man does on his last night is talk about the relationship between himself and those who are staying, and between himself and the one he is going to. The farewell discourse is a genre of relationships and commissions, not of metaphysics. When was the last time you heard somebody saying goodbye to his loved ones stop to explain what substance he was made of? And here is the detail almost everybody lets slip by. If the author of the fourth gospel wanted to leave it on record that his master was inferior to God, he had 13.5 chapters to say it clearly. He did not. He wrote the opposite in the first line of the book. What he did do was save this declaration for the farewell scene. Think about it from the other side, which is more uncomfortable. A writer opens his work by placing the Word alongside God and calling him God. And he closes it with the disciple falling down before Jesus and saying, "My Lord and my God." A man like that does not carelessly drop into the middle a line that sinks his entire book. Either that writer was incompetent, or those two things do not contradict each other. Further on, you will see that one of the greatest specialists on the fourth gospel in the 20th century answered exactly that, and his answer makes both camps uncomfortable in equal measure. Let us go back to the room, because there is one piece of that night that almost no discussion of this passage takes into account. Before comparing the Father to himself in that same supper, the Master had already used the same Greek word. He used it about somebody else, and he used it in a comparison so concrete, so domestic, and so impossible to twist that it settles in one stroke what kind of superiority he had in mind when he opened his mouth. It is in chapter 13, verse 16, and what is there is stranger than it looks, because in that single line the author uses a term that appears nowhere else in his gospel. Not one more time. It shows up there and never again in the whole book. Here it is in the King James. "Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him." Look at the two comparisons he has just made, because both are domestic and both are awkward for the popular argument. A servant and his Lord, one who is sent and the one who sends him. What do those two pairs have in common? That in neither of them is there a difference of species. The one who serves and the one who commands are equally human. They eat the same food, they fall ill the same way, they die the same way. The one who sends a message and the one who carries it are the same kind of creature. The only thing separating them is position within a relationship, and that position exists only as long as the commission lasts. And now the strange detail I promised you. The word the text translates as one who is sent is apostolos. That term appears exactly once in the whole Gospel of John, and it is right here, not before, not after. In 21 chapters, a single appearance, and it does not appear with the technical weight of the 12 apostles, but in the ordinary street sense, the man who carries a message on somebody else's behalf. It is as if the author had kept that word in reserve throughout the entire book in order to release it precisely in the scene where it was needed. The comparative he employs is the same one. Meizon, the identical form that is going to appear shortly afterward, referring to the Father. Think about what that means for our question. That night in that room, the comparative greater already had an established sense. And it was not the sense of substance. It was the sense of who commands and who is commanded. When the word reappears a few lines later, it does not arrive blank. It arrives loaded with the meaning he himself had just fixed in front of those men. Keep going a little further, because 4 verses later the matter becomes clearer still. John chapter 13, verse 20. He that receiveth whomsoever I send receiveth me. And he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. Read it as a chain. Somebody receives a disciple. In receiving him, he receives the Master. In receiving the Master, he receives God. The links are not identical to one another in function, but what travels down the chain is identical at every stretch. To receive the representative is to receive the one represented. And here, I need to give you the cultural background, with a warning up front, so that nobody can accuse you of making things up. In the Jewish world, there was a legal figure for exactly this. The representative sent by somebody acted with the authority of the one who sent him, and whatever he settled counted as though his master had settled it in person. The principle is summed up in a very well-known formula. A man's agent is as the man himself. The honest warning is this. That formula, as it is usually quoted, is preserved in rabbinic texts that were put into writing after the 1st century, and the Hebrew noun for that office does not appear in the Old Testament. So I'm not going to tell you that Jesus was quoting a legal code that was in force and numbered. What the Old Testament does show is the practice at work long before. In Genesis 24, Abraham's servant travels far away, negotiates a marriage, and pledges his master's word, and the agreement holds. Nobody argues about whether the servant had the rank of a patriarch. The agreement held because the man who made it went in another man's name. That idea, the idea of full representation, is what scholars of the 4th Gospel identified as the backbone of the sending motif in John. The Norwegian Peder Borgen published in 1968 a study on the agent in the 4th Gospel that changed the discussion. Raymond Brown, in his commentary on John, takes up that line and adds something worth hearing in full. He says that much of the equivalence between the Father and the Son in this Gospel is framed in the language of representation. And he adds that John deepens that legal relationship until it becomes a relationship of likeness of nature. Notice the nuance, because it is exactly where everything is decided. Brown is not saying the sending motif lowers the Son. He is saying that John takes that category and carries it further than the category itself could go. Now watch how the text itself displays it. Within that same conversation, the Master says that the words he speaks, he does not speak of himself, but that the Father who dwells in him does the works. He also says that the word they heard is not his, but the Father's who sent him. That is pure representative language. The one sent brings no message of his own, except that no representative in history ever said what he said a few lines earlier. If this is clearing the subject up for you, subscribe. We upload studies like this every week. Go back to chapter 14 and stop at verse 12, because here the word greater appears for the 3rd time that same night, and this time it is not referring to the Father. It reads like this: He that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. Greater, the same comparative. And this time he is not comparing the Son with the Father. He is comparing his disciples with himself. Sit with that as long as you need to, because it dismantles the entire argument in one blow. If the word greater proved superiority of nature, then in that verse, the fisherman from Galilee would be of a nature superior to Jesus of Nazareth. Nobody holds that. Not even those who deny the divinity of the Messiah hold it, because it would be ridiculous. Everyone understands without effort that greater there means greater reach, more people, more territory, works that would arrive where his 3-year ministry did not. Within the same chapter then, and before the same audience, the speaker uses that comparative in a way everybody interprets correctly without any trouble. And 16 verses further down, when the same word appears referring to the Father, all of a sudden it is decided that now it must be talking about divine substance. That is not exegesis. That is choosing the meaning that suits us depending on whom we want to bring down. And the finish is still to come, because it is not enough to show that the sentence does not say what it seems to say. What is missing is the positive side. We have to show what that same chapter says about who he is. And that is where the matter becomes truly serious, because what is in chapter 14, in the mouth of that same man and on that same night, is something no prophet of Israel ever dared to say. Let us go to the beginning of the chapter, to the first line, the one everybody skips because it sounds like devotional comfort and nothing more. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. Read it slowly. He's placing trust in himself alongside trust in God in the same command, with the same verb, addressed to monotheistic Jews who had recited since childhood that the Lord is one. Search the whole Old Testament for somebody who talks like that. Moses came down the mountain with the law in his hand and never once said, "Trust in God and trust also in me." Isaiah had the most overwhelming vision of the divine throne that Scripture records, and came out of it saying that he was a man of unclean lips. Elijah called down fire from heaven in front of all Israel, and in the prayer of that very moment called himself a servant. Not one of them ever asked for himself a fraction of the trust that is owed to God, because for a prophet of Israel, that was precisely the thing you could not do. And this man asks for it in the first line of the conversation, without giving any explanation, like somebody stating the obvious. Now keep going down the chapter and look at what piles up before we reach the verse we are studying. In verse 6, he says that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no man comes to the Father but by him. He does not say he knows the way, he says he is it. Go down to verse 9. When Philip asked to see the Father, he answers with a line that ought to stop anybody in their tracks. He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. He did not say he resembled him. He did not say he represented him well. He said that seeing him was seeing the other. 3 lines further down, he explains that the words he speaks are not his own, and that the Father who lives in him is the one performing the works. That is the part that sounds like subordination, and it is real. We are not going to hide it. And then 3 verses further down comes the thing that breaks the whole category, verses 13 and 14. And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. Stop here. This is the point where the representative motif stops being enough. And I want you to see why with total clarity. An envoy carries the message, an ambassador transmits the request, a messenger delivers the word and goes back. None of them, in any culture and in any century, personally answers the prayers addressed to him. That is precisely the line that separates the messenger from the one who sends him. And he crosses it in a single sentence. He says that whatever they ask, he will do it. Think about the actual scene that implies. Millions of people in different languages on different continents at the same hour asking for things in his name. And he claiming that he hears them all and that he answers. A human being cannot do that. An angel cannot do that. A dead and buried prophet cannot do that. Whoever claims that about himself is claiming 2 things that are attributed to God alone. That he hears everyone at the same time, and that he has the power to act on behalf of everyone. And there is still more in the same chapter. In verse 23 he says that whoever loves him will keep his word, and that the Father will love him, and that we will come to him and make our home with him. We will come, in the plural, the 2 of them together living inside a person, Now put the pieces together, and you will understand why this discussion has gone almost 2,000 years without being settled by trading isolated verses. In the same chapter 14 of the same gospel, in the same conversation, we have a man who says that his words are not his own but the Father's, and who also says that he personally answers the prayers of the entire world, who says that the Father is greater, and who also says that seeing him is seeing the Father. If you take only the first group of sentences, you build a diminished Jesus. If you take only the second, you build a Jesus who absorbs the Father and erases the distinction between the two. Both readings are comfortable and both are dishonest because both need to cover half the chapter with one hand. And this does not stay inside chapter 14. Go back to chapter 5, and you will find the scene in which his opponents understand perfectly well what is going on. There, the text says they were seeking to kill him because he called God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Pay attention to what happens after that accusation, because it is the most revealing thing of all. Any devout Jew, on hearing such a charge, would have torn his clothes and said they had misunderstood him. Barnabas and Paul did exactly that in Lystra when the crowd tried to worship them. They tore their clothing and shouted that they too were men. That is the normal reaction of somebody who fears God and is accused of usurping his place. The Nazarene does none of that. Instead of denying the charge, he starts explaining how his relationship with the Father works, and he ends by saying that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. That answer does not lower the temperature, it raises it. And a few chapters later comes the shortest and heaviest sentence in the Gospel, "I and my Father are one." The reaction of the crowd, according to the text, was to pick up stones. They were not confused. They had understood. And the book closes with Thomas, the man who had demanded to put his finger in the wounds, looking at him and saying, "My Lord and my God." And the Master does not correct him. He commends him and adds that blessed are those who will believe without having seen. That is the gospel in which our sentence appears. Not a book that debates whether he was divine. The book that affirms it in the first line and confirms it in the last scene. And even so, the sentence is there. It is still there. So the honest question is not how do we make it disappear? The honest question is what those who did believe did with it when they had to answer in public to people using it as a weapon. And the answer to that is a story with names, dates, and a council. It begins almost 100 years earlier than nearly everyone assumes, and the first man to use this verse as a weapon did not use it against the divinity of Christ. He used it for exactly the opposite reason. Carthage, North Africa, around the year 200, a lawyer converted to Christianity with a ferocious pen writes against a man named Praxeas. What Praxeas taught was not that the Son was less. He taught the opposite, that the Father and the Son were the same person under different names, like an actor changing masks depending on the scene. Under that idea, it was the Father himself who had been born and had died on the cross. Tertullian, in order to show that this is impossible, goes and takes our verse. If the Son declares that the Father surpasses him, then there are two, and not one dressed up as two. Nobody is greater than himself. Write down the date, because it changes the whole map of this discussion. The first famous use of this line in a Christian debate happens roughly a century before the controversy everybody associates with it was even born. And it was used to defend the distinction between the persons, not to deny the divinity of the Son. The same text, a weapon in two opposing armies 100 years apart. Store that away, because in a moment you are going to see a third camp using it as well. Alexandria, Egypt, more than 100 years later, one of the most cultured cities in the world, with its library, its philosophers, and its schools of rhetoric arguing on the street corners. A presbyter named Arius begins teaching something that sounds reasonable and orderly. God is one, he is uncreated and has no beginning. The Son is the highest of all creation, above the angels, the agent of everything that exists, but created, and hence his formula, the one sung in the streets, there was when he was not. His bishop, Alexander, condemns him. The dispute overflows the city and turns into a fire that crosses the empire. And among the texts Arius and his followers laid on the table, one always showed up. You already know which one. It is worth seeing up close what that city was like, because it explains why the fire spread so fast. Alexandria had a harbor, a lighthouse, schools of rhetoric, and a tradition of public argument going back centuries. There, theology did not stay among specialists. It came down to the docks and the markets. The ancient chroniclers tell us that the slogans of the dispute were sung in the streets and that people argued about divine substances while buying fish. It is worth clarifying that a good part of those accounts reaches us from later church historians, written by people who had already picked a side, so the color of the scene should be taken with caution. The hard fact is a different one, and that one is solid. The dispute overflowed the synods and became a matter of the street. And something should be said about Arius, because a cartoon villain explains nothing. Arius was not a cynic out to destroy the faith. He was a man with a serious and sincere theological problem. His concern was to protect the oneness of God. If the Father is the only one without a beginning, he reasoned, then anyone else, the Son included, must have received his existence from somewhere. He was trying to defend monotheism, not attack it. His error, according to those who answered him, was not in the intention but in the premise. He took for granted that to beget and to create are the same operation, and from there everything else followed under its own weight. Understanding it this way matters for a practical reason for you. Whoever knocks on your door today with this verse is not a villain either. He is almost always somebody trying to honor God in the way he was taught, and you do not argue with that person the way you argue with an enemy. The year 325. The emperor summons the bishops of the Christian world to a city in Bithynia called Nicaea. They gather to decide whether the Son is of the same substance as the Father, or of a similar substance. And this is where I have to give you a fact you may find uncomfortable, and I would rather you get it from me than find it in a hostile video. Nicaea did not erase the verse. It did not declare it false. It did not change it. It did not remove it from the copies. The text went on being there, in every manuscript, exactly as it was. And it is still in your Bible today. What they did was argue about what it means, that for us is good news. If the problem could be solved by hiding a verse, it would be proof that there was no answer. Do you know who the man was who fought Arius hardest for the rest of his life? A young deacon who was at that council and who would later be Bishop of Alexandria. Athanasius. He was exiled 5 times. He spent years fleeing, in hiding, writing from exile. Now comes what almost nobody expects. When Athanasius writes his discourses against the Arians and reaches this verse, he does not dodge it. He does not say it is badly translated or that it is an interpolation. He does something far bolder. He uses it in his own favor. His reasoning is this: when we compare things of different natures, we do not say that one is greater than the other. We say that they are something else entirely. Nobody says that a man is greater than a stone. We say one man is greater than another man, one king greater than another king. The very fact that the Son places himself in a comparison with the Father, Athanasius argues, already assumes that they share the thing being compared, and that greater for him points to origin. The Father is the source, and the Son proceeds from that source eternally, without ever having begun to exist. Let that settle. The greatest enemy of Arianism took the favorite verse of the Arians and placed it in his own column. And he was not the only one. A few decades later, Gregory of Nazianzus, one of the great theologians of Cappadocia, faces the same objection in a discourse devoted precisely to this. His argument has a perfect symmetry. He says, in essence, the following. You quote greater at me. Very well. But Scripture also says equal, and both words are there in the same book. If only greater existed, you would have a point. Since both exist, something has to give, because nothing can be at the same time greater than another thing and equivalent to that same thing in the same sense. And the way out, says Gregory, is that they are not talking about the same thing. The greater refers to origin, and the equal refers to nature. Notice the method, because it is the most valuable part of all this. He did not choose the verse that suited him. He put both on the table and looked for a reading that left both standing. Write in the comments which answer strikes you as more solid. The one about origin, or the one that comes next. Because there is a second answer, and it is as ancient as the first. On the other side of the Mediterranean, in Latin, Augustine of Hippo answers in a different way. For him, the key is not eternal origin, but the incarnation. He takes the hymn Paul quotes to the Philippians, where it is said that the Messiah, being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to cling to, but emptied himself, taking the condition of a slave. And with that he builds his answer. With respect to the form of God, he is equal to the Father. With respect to the form of a servant which he himself took, he is less. The same person, two ways of existing, two true statements. Cyril of Alexandria and Ambrose of Milan travel that same road. Now add the two together and look at what you have in your hand. The ones who won the debate, the ones who have stood as the reference point of the Christian faith for 1700 years, did not give a single answer to this verse. They gave two. And those two answers do not say the same thing. One locates the greater in eternity in the relationship of origin between the Father and the Son. The other locates it in time, in the body, in the condition he took on when he was born in Bethlehem. A theologian who holds the first and another who holds the second are in real disagreement, not in a quibble over vocabulary. And here is the part I want you to take away from this section. When somebody tells you that the church always explained this sentence in one single way, that person is not lying out of malice. He simply has not read both sides. There were two explanations from very early on, and both lived side by side within the same faith without anyone being called a heretic for preferring one. And that, far from weakening the case, strengthens it, because it means that neither of the two was invented in a hurry to cover a hole. They were two serious attempts made by people who risked exile and their lives to hold both halves of the text at once, without breaking either one. Not one of them, however, not Tertullian, not Athanasius, not Gregory, not Augustine, did what is done all the time today online: pretend the uncomfortable verse does not exist. And since we are on the ground of honesty, it is time for the hardest part of this study, because there is a modern specialist, one of the greatest readers of this gospel in the last century, who maintains something that pleases neither camp. And he has arguments. His name was Charles Kingsley Barrett, professor at Durham, author of a commentary on the fourth gospel that is still required reading in any serious faculty. A man who spent decades reading this book line by line in Greek, Barrett published an essay with a title that leaves no room for doubt. He titled it, literally, with our verse, "The Father is greater than I," John 14:28, subordinationist Christology in the New Testament. It appeared in a volume honoring the scholar Rudolf Schnackenburg, published in Germany in 1974. His thesis, summed up without ornament, is that the subordination of the Son to the Father in this gospel is real and not a translation problem, that it is there written down and that the author put it there deliberately. A believer hearing that for the first time tenses up. Hold on, because the other half is still missing, and the other half is what makes Barrett such a valuable witness. That same man maintains that this entire gospel must be read under the affirmation that the works and the words of the Nazarene are the works and the words of God, and that if this were not true, the book would simply be blasphemous. There is no middle ground in his reading. Either John wrote about somebody divine or he wrote a monstrosity. To sum up, a specialist with no apologetic commitment whatsoever, a man nobody can accuse of forcing the text to defend a creed, reached this conclusion. The fourth gospel affirms both things at once, and its author saw no contradiction there. That is the point. The tension that seems unbearable to us did not seem unbearable to the man who wrote the book. Other researchers argue with him, and it is worth knowing that. James Dunn, also at Durham, maintains that calling this subordination is importing into the text a question the text was not yet asking. For Dunn, what is at stake in sentences like this one is not the rank of the Son, but the validity of the revelation he brings, whether what he says really is what God says. Francis Watson argues with Dunn about where the center of the matter lies. Count carefully what you have just received, because it is rare to hear it said out loud. 3 first-rate specialists reading the same Greek text, disagreeing among themselves. So when somebody begins a sentence with scholars agree that this verse means such and such, you already know there is a problem. They do not agree. What you can verify is what the text says, and that is what we have been doing. Now for the most uncomfortable part of all, and we are going to do it in full. Presenting the opposing argument in its strongest version, not the weak version that is easy to knock down, the best one it has. Whoever denies the divinity of the Messiah does not lean on a single verse. He arrives with a set and an orderly one. He begins with ours. He goes on to the morning of the resurrection, when he tells Mary that he is ascending to his Father and their Father, to his God and their God. If he has a God, they argue, then he is not one. He adds the passage where it says that nobody knows the day or the hour, not the angels, not the Son, but only the Father. If he is ignorant of something, they say, he is not omniscient. He adds the letter to the Corinthians, where it is stated that the head of Christ is God, and that other line from the same writer where, at the end of all things, the Son himself will be subject to the one who subjected all things to him. And he closes with chapter 5 of John, where the Nazarene himself declares that the Son can do nothing of himself. Laid out like that, in a row, it is impressive. And I want you to know something. None of those texts is false, none of them is badly translated, and none of them can be crossed out. They are all in your Bible, and they have to be answered. Look closely at where that reasoning fails, because it fails at a single point, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. All those passages describe relationship, mission, and assumed condition. None of them describes origin or substance. None of them says that the Son began to exist. None of them says that he was made, created, formed, or produced. And that is the statement required to sustain the conclusion. Go through them one by one with that filter. That he has a God and a Father on the morning of the resurrection describes a relationship. That he does not know the hour describes a condition within the incarnation, the same condition in which that man got hungry, grew tired, and slept in a boat. That the head of Christ is God describes an order within a relationship, in a passage where that same writer is talking about how people he considers equal in dignity relate to one another. That the Son is made subject at the end describes the outcome of a mission, not the belated discovery that he was a creature. That he can do nothing of himself describes, in the text's own words, that he does exactly what he sees the Father doing, something no creature could claim without blaspheming. Now realize what is needed to get from that list to the intended conclusion. What is needed is a sentence saying that the Son was created. That sentence is not in the Bible. It does exist and it is famous, but no apostle wrote it. Arian formulated it in Alexandria in the 4th century. There was when he was not. 5 words that define an entire position and that belong not to the New Testament but to an Egyptian presbyter arguing with his bishop. Let that land properly. The central claim of the opposing position appears in no book of Scripture. It is deduced. And it is deduced from texts that, read in full, are talking about something else, whereas the opposite claim is written down and in several forms. It is in the first line of the gospel we are studying. It is in Thomas's mouth at the end. It is in that poem the Philippians received by letter, where somebody who existed in the form of God empties himself and takes the condition of a slave, in that order, and not the reverse. First he was, then he emptied himself. That order matters more than anything else, I will tell you today. Nobody can empty himself of what he never had. Nobody takes the form of a servant if he was already a servant from the beginning. And that him brings us back at last to the question we left open at the start, the one that comes out of verse 28 itself. If he was going to die in less than 24 hours, why on earth were his disciples supposed to be glad? His answer is 2 chapters away in the same conversation, and it is one of the most intimate prayers Scripture records. Chapter 17, verse 5. He lifts his eyes to heaven and asks, "And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self with the glory which I had with thee before the world was." Read the end of that petition again. Before the world was. He is not asking for a new prize. He is asking for the return of something that was already his, in a place where he had already been, before the universe existed, in which he is now kneeling and sweating. A few lines earlier, he had said it in the form of a complete itinerary. I came forth from the Father, and am come into the world. Again I leave the world and go to the Father. 4 movements in a single sentence. Come forth, come, leave, return. A round trip with a known origin. Now assemble the whole scene, and you will see why the joy made sense. A man is sitting in a borrowed room on the last night of his life. In a few hours they will arrest him in a garden. At dawn, he will be bound before a tribunal. Before the following afternoon falls, he will be dead, executed in the most humiliating way the empire had invented. And in the middle of that, he looks at his own and tells them that if they really loved him, they would be glad because he is going home. Imagine somebody who has spent years far from his family, stuck in a place that was not his, doing brutally hard work he could not walk away from. The day finally comes when he goes back. Those who truly love him cry yes, because they are going to miss him. But they are glad because they know where he comes from and where he is going. The ones thinking only of themselves would want to hold him back. That is exactly the rebuke. They are sad because they are thinking about what they are going to lose and not about what he is going to recover. And now, the final piece, the one that organizes everything we have seen today. From where is he making the comparison? From the ground, from the exhaustion, the sweat, the flesh, the body that in a few hours is going to be destroyed. He's comparing the place where he is at that moment with the place he is going to. And from there, with complete justice, the Father is greater. He did not say the Father is made of better material. He did not say the Father existed and I did not. He said, standing where he stood, that the one he was going to is greater. And the text of Philippians describes that same movement in 3 stages. He existed in the form of God. He emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, and therefore he was exalted to the name that is above every name. Voluntary descent. lower state assumed. Return with exaltation. In that scheme, the greater of verse 28 is not a crack in the doctrine. It is the logical consequence of somebody having come down of his own will. And the joy he demands of them is not joy over the death. It is joy over the homecoming that follows it. One more point of honesty before we close. When somebody shows you the first chapter of this gospel to prove the divinity of the Messiah, there are two verses that tend to be quoted together. The first is the opening line, where the Word is with God and is God. That text is firm. It appears the same way in every manuscript and nobody disputes its wording. The other is verse 18, where many modern versions read the only God, or the only begotten God, instead of the only begotten Son. There a genuine difference between manuscripts does exist. The oldest papyri we have and two of the most important codices carry the reading with the word God, and modern textual criticism tends to prefer it precisely because it is the harder one, the reading a copyist would have had reason to soften rather than to invent. Many ancient fathers, however, quoted the other. I'm telling you this in plain words. That verse has a real and disputed variant. Use it if you want, but explain that. You do not need it for the argument, and a defense resting on a piece of evidence the other side can refute collapses entirely, even if everything else is correct. The case does not depend on a disputed verse. It depends on an entire gospel that opens by placing the Word alongside God, that in the middle shows a man receiving prayers and forgiving sins, and that ends with a disciple on his knees calling him his Lord and his God without being corrected. One weighty objection remains, and if we do not answer it, everything above collapses. The objection is this: if the Son is God and the Father is God, are we not talking about two gods? For a first-century Jew, that question was not academic. It was the line separating faithfulness from treason. It was a confession that Deuteronomy itself commands them to repeat when they lie down and when they rise up, and that they learned as children. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. It is in Deuteronomy chapter 6. That text was not an abstract idea about divine arithmetic. It was the national identity of a people who had watched their neighbors fill their temples with statues and who had paid with exile every time they gave into it. Now remember who the first people to worship the Nazarene were. They were not Greeks with a taste for philosophy. They were Jews, fishermen, tax collectors, converted Pharisees, women from Galilee, people who still went to the temple, who still kept the Sabbath, who still recited that confession. And those same people began doing things with Jesus that no Jew did with anyone who was not God. They sang to him, they called on him, they baptized in his name, they gathered to break bread invoking him, they died rather than deny that he was Lord. Larry Hurtado, who was professor at Edinburgh, devoted his career to studying exactly that phenomenon. His best-known work on the subject, published in 2003, is called Lord Jesus Christ, Devotion to Jesus in Earliest Christianity. His conclusion, sustained with early documentation, is that this devotion did not appear centuries later through pagan contamination, as is sometimes repeated. It appeared with extraordinary speed inside Jewish communities, among people who did not stop being monotheists. Richard Bauckham of the University of St. Andrews proposed a tool for understanding how that was possible. His argument is that we are asking the wrong question when we argue about substances, because that is a Greek question. A Jew did not ask what material God is made of. He asked who the one God is, and he identified him by two things nobody else shares. He is the only one who created everything that exists, and he is the only one who rules over everything that exists. Any other being, however exalted, stands on the created side. With that tool in hand, go back to the New Testament and notice where they place Jesus. The prologue of the fourth gospel says that all things were made through the Word, and that without him was not anything made that was made. That puts him on the Creator's side, not on the side of the created, and it says so with a deliberate redundancy, like a man locking a door so that nobody can open it afterward. And there is an even bolder text, written by a Pharisee, probably before the Gospels existed. In the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 8, Paul says that for us there is one God, the Father, from whom are all things, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things. Watch what he has just done, because the audacity of it is hard to overstate. He took the daily confession of Israel, the one they recited every morning, split it in two, and put the Father in one half and Jesus in the other. He did not add a second God beside the first. He placed the Son inside the monotheistic confession. A Jew wanting to manufacture a second God would have written something else. He would have said that besides the Lord, there is another Lord. Paul does the opposite. He uses the very words of Deuteronomy and distributes them. You should also know that Hurtado and Bauckham do not agree on everything, and that other researchers dispute their models. Nobody here is handing you a universal consensus, because none exists. What is hard to deny, and is acknowledged even by people who do not share the Christian faith, is the hard historical fact. The worship of Jesus is extremely early and is born inside Judaism, not outside it. And if that strikes you as strong, wait, because there is a scene in the very gospel we are studying where the Nazarene takes the matter to the limit, and the reaction of the crowd leaves no room for gentle interpretations. Chapter 8. A long argument with a group of opponents rising in temperature line by line. Abraham's name comes up. They throw it in his face that he is not yet 50 years old and claims to have seen the patriarch. And he answers with a short sentence in the present tense, grammatically impossible. Before Abraham was, I am. He did not say I was. He did not say I existed. He used the present tense to speak of a time before a man who had been dead for nearly 2,000 years. The immediate reaction is the best proof of how the people standing there understood that sentence. The text says they took up stones to throw at him. Nobody stones a man for a grammatical slip. In that legal framework, stoning was the penalty for blasphemy. His hearers, Aramaic-speaking Jews who knew their own tradition far better than we do, heard that sentence and went straight out to look for stones. And the same thing happens again 2 chapters later. He says that he and the Father are one, and again the stones. He asks them for which of his good works they are stoning him. And the answer they give is what settles the scene. They are not stoning him for any good work, but for blasphemy, because being a man he makes himself God. There you have the hostile testimony, which in history is worth its weight in gold. His enemies were not enthusiastic disciples reading too much into things. They were people motivated to discredit him, who were present, who spoke his language and shared his culture. And what they understood was exactly that. One final detail about that scene, so you use it well. He does not tell them they reached the wrong conclusion. He answers them with an argument from the Psalms and finishes by asking them to believe because of the works. Once again, the perfect occasion to deny the charge, and once again, no denial. There is still one question left holding up everything else. If he was in that glory before the world existed, if he could ask for it back like a man claiming what is his own, then something arises that ought to cost you sleep. Why did he come down? Nobody forced him. It was not a punishment. It was not an accident. The letter to the Philippians says it with a reflexive verb that admits no argument. He emptied himself. It was a decision. And the consequence of that decision is precisely the sentence used against him today. In coming down, he ended up in a position from which it was true to say that the Father is greater. The verse that makes believers so uncomfortable is, looked at head-on, the mark of what it cost him. The letter to the Hebrews explains the reason without detours. It says that since the children are of flesh and blood, he shared in the same, and that he did it to destroy through death the one who had the power of death. And it adds the pastoral reason, so that he could help those who are tested, having been tested himself. Think about the mechanics of that without poetry. To die, you have to be mortal. A being who cannot die cannot lay down his life for anyone. If the Word had stayed where he was, in the glory he mentions in chapter 17, he would have gone on being worthy of all worship, but he could not have done the one thing that was needed. Which means the lower condition was not a defect in the plan, it was the plan. Imagine, purely as an illustration to understand the logic, somebody who sees a person at the bottom of a pit. He can shout instructions from above, he can throw down a rope, he can also climb down. And if he climbs down, the moment his feet touch the mud, it is true to say that whoever stayed up top is higher than he is. That does not make him less capable. It is an exact description of where he chose to put himself. The image is mine, not the text's, and do not push it further than it goes. But the logic is the text's. First he was, then he emptied himself, then he was exalted. And that same letter adds the detail that turns the doctrine into something you feel in your chest. It says that we do not have a high priest incapable of sympathizing with our weaknesses, but one who went through the same trials. Weigh the word sympathize. It means to suffer along with somebody, not to look on from a distance with pity, to go through the same thing. When you are in the hospital at 3 in the morning, when the money does not stretch and the bills keep coming, when somebody you love stops answering your messages, the question that comes out on its own is not what substance God is made of. The question is whether he knows what this is like, and the answer the New Testament gives is yes, and that he knows because he lived it. He was hungry. He grew tired at midday beside a well and asked for water. He wept in front of a friend's tomb, even though he knew he would raise him within minutes. He was in such anguish that he said his soul was sorrowful unto death. He was betrayed by a man who had eaten from his dish. His closest friends abandoned him at the exact moment he needed them most. None of that would be possible if he had never accepted a position from which the Father was greater. And there is the full turn of this study. The sentence used to prove that he was not God actually describes how far down the one who was God was willing to come. Let us bring this down to the place where it really happens, which is not a council or a university library. It happens on a Saturday morning at your front door, with 2 friendly people carrying a pamphlet and a Bible open to exactly this page. It happens at lunch at work, when somebody drops the sentence with a smile and waits to see your face. It happens in your own home, when a child who has started reading things on the internet arrives with the question and looks at you waiting for the answer. And in all 3 cases, the most common mistake is the same one: answering fast. Answering fast means quoting from memory a verse that points the other way and feeling satisfied. That exchange convinces nobody. One side fires greater, the other side fires we are one, and both walk away thinking they won. There is something better, and it does not require you to be an expert in Greek. Ask the other person to read the verse in full, out loud, from the beginning of the sentence. Not the last clause, the whole sentence, with the promise of return at the start and with the "if ye loved me." They have almost never done it. Many discover in that moment that the sentence was hooked onto something they did not know about, and discovering it from their own mouth is worth 10 times more than hearing you say it. Then ask something very simple. What does the word greater mean in verse 12 of this same chapter, where it says the disciples would do greater works? Leave the question hanging in the air. Do not answer it yourself, because there are only 2 ways out, and both of them help. Either the person acknowledges that greater there means reach and not nature, and in that case they have already accepted that the term does not prove what they wanted it to prove, or they insist that it means nature there too, and in that case they have to accept that Peter was of a nature superior to Jesus, which nobody is willing to defend out loud. And if the conversation continues, there is a third question you can ask with no aggression at all. In this same chapter, 14 verses earlier, he says that whatever they ask in his name, he will do it. What kind of creature personally answers the prayers of the whole world? None of those three things is a debating trick. All three are simply reading the whole chapter instead of one line. And there is a fourth thing, which is not technical and which matters more than the other three. Do not humiliate the person asking. The one knocking on your door on a Saturday at 9 in the morning is doing something that costs them, out of a conviction that cost them. The one who drops the sentence at lunch is often not attacking. They are testing whether you know what you believe or whether you are only repeating it. And the child who comes with the doubt is not losing his faith. He's looking for somebody who will not get nervous. The tone with which you answer teaches as much as the content. A father who gets angry when questioned is teaching without meaning to that faith cannot survive questions. A father who sits down, opens the Bible and says, "Let us read the whole thing," is teaching the opposite. And now let us go back to that room, because the scene of that night was not over yet, and its last line is what gives meaning to the whole study. After that comparison, after explaining to them that he was telling them in advance so they would believe when it happened, the discourse breaks off with a plain domestic order. "Arise, let us go hence." They got up. They went out into the cold Jerusalem night, crossed the valley, entered a garden among olive trees. There he fell to the ground and prayed. There the torches and the guard arrived. There they arrested him. The next day, everything he had announced at that table came to pass in front of the eyes of the men who had understood nothing. And on Sunday, when the stone was rolled away and the tomb was empty, the sentence that had sounded incomprehensible to them that night became transparent. He had gone home, and before leaving altogether, he spent 40 days with them, so that nobody could say they had imagined it. There is one detail in those appearances that closes the circle of everything we have seen. In one of them, Thomas is present, the man who had demanded physical proof. He looks at him, and what comes out of his mouth is not teacher or prophet or envoy. What comes out, whole, is the confession that closes the book, "My Lord and my God." And the one who had said the Father is greater than I heard that, had one last chance to correct it and did not. A Jewish prophet would have torn his clothes. He accepted it and added a blessing for those who would believe without having seen. That blessing was for you. So the answer to the question we began with fits in 2 lines. He said the Father was greater because he said it from below, from a borrowed room, with his hands still wet from washing other men's feet, hours away from dying, in the condition he himself had chosen to take on when he came down. Compared with the place he had come from and to which he was returning that very week, it was true. And neither half cancels the other. The one who said the Father is greater is the same one who said that whoever looked at him was looking at the Father. The one who said his words were not his own is the same one who said he would answer the prayers. The one who said goodbye that night is the same one who on Sunday let them call him God without correcting anybody. If that tension makes you uncomfortable, I want to tell you something before we finish. It made Tertullian uncomfortable, and Arius and Athanasius and Gregory and Augustine and Barrett. You are in good company. What you cannot do, if you want to be honest, is resolve it by tearing out the half that gets in your way. The next time somebody puts a finger on that verse, do not argue. Ask them to read it whole, out loud, from the beginning. And while they read it, Listen to the first half, the part that comes before the "if ye loved me." I go away and come again unto you. He promised to return, and he returned on Sunday. If this helped you, on the screen I am leaving you the study that answers the other half of this story.